I remember the text message perfectly. It flashed on my screen late one Tuesday night, and the way my heart instantly seized up told me everything I needed to know. This was going to change things. The message wasn't from my friend, Ethan. It wasn't from anyone I usually talk to at 11 p.m. It was from Sarah, Ethan's older sister, and the content was just 3 sentences long. Come upstairs, but don't knock. He's asleep. And bring the thing we talked about. Now, you have to understand the dynamic here. I was 20, living in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment near campus with Ethan, my lifelong friend. Sarah was 3 years older, already out of college, working in the city, and she usually only swung by to drop off laundry or scold Ethan about his diet. To me, she was almost mythological, cool, smart, utterly self-possessed, and completely off-limits. Ethan was fiercely protective of her, and I respected that boundary like it was a razor-wire fence. She was the star athlete turned corporate shark. I was the guy who tripped over air. Our interactions were usually limited to a polite, awkward, "Hi, Mark." "Hey, Sarah." But over the last few weeks, something had shifted. She was coming over more often. Not just for Ethan, but sometimes she'd arrive after he'd left for class, or she'd linger in the kitchen making tea late at night when he was glued to his video games. We started having these quiet conversations, usually about the absurd pressure of being young and figuring out life. They were small, almost whispered exchanges in the dark, and they made me feel seen in a way Ethan, bless his heart, never could. These weren't flirty talks. They were deep, heavy, existential discussions about fear and ambition. They were the kind of talks that feel dangerous because they create a connection you know you shouldn't have with your best friend's sister. The thing we talked about was the biggest complication. It wasn't anything illegal or scandalous. It was a research paper for one of Ethan's toughest classes, one that Sarah had taken years ago and knew the material inside and out. Ethan was failing it, and Sarah had promised to look over my draft to make sure the structure was solid before I submitted it. We were doing this in secret because Ethan, stubborn and proud, hated taking help, especially from his sister. He wanted to bomb the class on his own terms, I guess. It was just a paper, but sneaking around always makes things feel bigger, heavier. So there I was, standing in the middle of our tiny living room, holding my laptop with the glow of Sarah's text illuminating my face. Ethan was snoring loudly, a sound that usually comforted me, but tonight felt like a loud ticking clock. The simple act of walking across the hall and up a flight of stairs felt like crossing an international border. I knew if Ethan woke up, he wouldn't believe it was just about the paper. He'd see the secrecy, the late hour, the way we were doing this, and everything would explode. My friendship, my living situation, maybe even the fragile, strange connection I'd built with Sarah, it was all teetering on this one move. I gripped the laptop harder, took a breath, and started moving toward the door, telling myself it was just to help Ethan. But just as I reached the bottom step of the staircase, a light flickered on in the kitchen behind me, and a low voice cut through the silence. "Mark, where are you going?" The light that flickered on wasn't a motion sensor or a ghost. It was just Ethan, groggy and massive in a faded t-shirt, standing by the fridge, squinting in the dim light of the overhead bulb. His voice was thick with sleep, and the question hung in the air, weighted with suspicion. I froze mid-step, my heart hammering against my ribs like I'd been caught stealing. "Oh, hey man," I whispered, trying to sound casual, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Couldn't sleep. Just grabbing a bottle of water. I thought you were dead to the world." Ethan yawned, the sound huge and careless. "Almost. Had a bad dream. Thought I heard something." He rubbed his eyes, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to look past me, see the staircase I was about to climb, and ask why I was clutching my laptop instead of just a bottle of water. "What's with the computer?" I forced a laugh that felt brittle and thin, trying to pull an all-nighter on that economics paper. "It's due tomorrow, remember? I need the quiet of the city street noise to focus, not your award-winning snoring." It was a decent lie, but Ethan knew my habits. I usually worked at the library. Ethan grunted, pulling out a soda. "Whatever, dude. Just keep it down. Don't wake Sarah." And there it was, the name that felt like a bell ringing too loud in a quiet room. He looked right at me when he said it, maybe testing my reaction, maybe just being protective. "She's got that huge presentation tomorrow. She needs sleep." I nodded quickly, maybe too quickly. "Totally. Wouldn't dream of it." As Ethan shuffled back toward his room, the momentary relief was quickly replaced by a fresh wave of panic. He was awake now. He was on high alert, even if only subconsciously. The margin for error had just shrunk to zero. The reality was, Sarah had been my silent confidant for the last few months, and the need for this kind of secret meeting had become urgent. Our friendship with Ethan was rooted in brotherhood, video games, and shared cheap ramen. But Sarah and I, we talked about leaving. We talked about how suffocating our small town felt, how Ethan was maybe a little too comfortable being stagnant, and how we both dreamt of something bigger, something harder to get. The reason for the paper review was genuine. I needed her expertise. But the real magnetic pull was that connection, that feeling of being conspirators in a world that wasn't ready for our ambition. She saw my drive. I admired her courage. It was an intellectual crush, intense and complicated. But lately, the lines had started to blur. The shared silence sometimes lasted a beat too long. The look in her eyes was sometimes too knowing. I waited until Ethan's door clicked shut again. I had maybe 30 seconds before he fell back into his deep, untroubled sleep. I had to go up now. The text was clear: don't knock. I knew her bedroom was the first one at the top of the landing. I took one last look at the hallway, the familiar darkness suddenly feeling sinister, and crept onto the first wooden step. It let out a loud, terrifying creak. I froze again, my heart almost stopping. But the only sound was Ethan's distant, heavy breathing. I continued my ascent, step by careful step, my hands sweating on the laptop. When I finally reached her door, I found it slightly ajar, maybe a half-inch gap. I could see the light from her bedside lamp spilling faintly onto the carpet. I raised my hand to push it open, but then I heard a sound that made me drop my arm instantly. It wasn't Sarah. It was a man's low, indistinct voice coming from inside her room, followed by a quiet, quick laugh. Who was she talking to up there? My hand froze just inches from her door. The man's voice, it was deep, a little rough, and definitely not Ethan's. My mind immediately scrambled to find an innocent explanation. Maybe she was on a late-night work call? Maybe her presentation partner was reviewing slides with her over the phone? But the low laugh that followed sounded too intimate, too casual for a professional call. It had a warm, conspiratorial quality. A sharp, sick feeling hit the pit of my stomach, twisting everything I thought I knew about the last few weeks. All our whispered talks, the shared ambitions, the late-night tea sessions, had they meant nothing? Was I just the convenient, available listener, while she had a secret boyfriend all along? The possibility that she was involved with someone else, especially someone she hadn't mentioned, was suddenly a much larger and more painful problem than Ethan finding out I was upstairs. I stepped closer to the crack in the door, holding my breath so I could hear more clearly. I pressed my ear against the cool wood. Seriously? Sarah's voice, a soft, amused murmur. You're going to use that excuse again? The man chuckled again. It worked last time, didn't it? Besides, I needed an excuse to see you tonight. I didn't think he'd be home. The word slammed into me. Was he talking about Ethan? Did this mystery man think Ethan was the obstacle? And what did he mean, the last time? This wasn't the first time they had done this. My chest tightened with a confusing mix of betrayal and creeping fear. Betrayal because I thought we were building something genuine, and fear because if Ethan ever found out his older sister was having secret late-night rendezvous in their house, he would lose it. The protective older brother instinct in him was legendary, and I was holding the evidence just outside the door. I wanted to leave. I wanted to turn around, go downstairs, and pretend the text message had never arrived. But I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the floor. I still had the laptop, the pretense of the paper review, and the desperate need to understand what was actually happening behind that thin slice of wood. Was I about to walk in on a domestic drama, or something far worse? Just as I was about to tap the door lightly, despite her explicit instructions not to knock, I heard Sarah's voice again, closer this time, almost directly on the other side of the door. You really need to go, she whispered urgently. He's going to wake up any second. Then, a sudden, heavy metallic thud came from inside the room, followed by a frantic, shuffling noise. It sounded like something large had just been knocked over and quickly dragged across the floor. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a casual conversation. This was panic. I raised my fist again, ready to intervene, when the lock on the door slid back with a loud, unmistakable snick. She was opening the door. Not to me, but to let someone out. and I was standing directly in the hallway, exposed, with nowhere to hide. The snick of the lock was a gunshot in the silent house. My body reacted instantly, a surge of adrenaline forcing me to press myself flat against the wall, just beside the doorframe. The small recess provided minimal cover, but it was all I had. If she opened the door wide, she'd see me instantly, clutching my laptop like a shield. The door didn't swing open immediately. Instead, it was pushed just enough to allow a person to slip through. The light that spilled out was briefly blocked by a tall, dark silhouette. I could feel the whoosh of air as the person moved past, their presence heavy and swift. I squeezed my eyes shut, not wanting to make eye contact, praying that in the darkness of the hallway, they wouldn't notice me flattened against the textured wallpaper. The scent of the man hit me, not cologne, but something strong and earthy, like old leather and cigarettes. It was a completely unfamiliar smell, and it cemented the fact that this was a stranger, not someone from the college crowd. The man was quick. He moved to the top of the stairs, taking the first few steps down with silent, practiced ease. I held my breath, listening as his footsteps faded rapidly down the staircase toward the front door. He was getting away. He was escaping without seeing me. I let out a slow, silent exhale of relief and started to push away from the wall, thinking the danger was past. But before I could straighten up, Sarah's voice, sharp and stressed, cut through the quiet. Mark, she had seen me. Or maybe she just suspected I was there. I turned slowly, holding my hands up in a gesture of surrender mixed with confusion. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair a mess, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and sheer fury. The bedside lamp behind her cast a harsh shadow, making her face look gaunt and unfamiliar. Sarah, I just got here. I heard the noise. I stammered, pointing vaguely toward the stairwell where the stranger had vanished. I saw someone leaving. Who was that? Her composure snapped back into place with unnerving speed. Her eyes narrowed, and she pushed the door mostly shut, stepping out into the hallway to block my view entirely. It was nothing, Mark. A delivery guy? Wrong address. He was looking for apartment 1B. The lie was pathetic. Delivery guys don't slip in and out of a back bedroom at midnight, and they definitely don't cause a thud and then a panicked scramble. A delivery guy? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. Sarah, he wasn't carrying anything, and he was trying to hide. I heard you talking to him. You said he needed to go before Ethan woke up. What's going on? The look in her eyes shifted from anger to something deeper, something vulnerable that made my heart ache. She glanced nervously toward the stairwell, then back at me. She stepped closer, her hand gripping my arm, her nails digging in slightly. Mark, you can't tell Ethan you saw anyone, she hissed, her voice barely a breath. You absolutely cannot. He wouldn't understand. This is complicated. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I insisted, pulling my arm away. The betrayal was real now. I felt like I was being used, not trusted. I gestured toward the room behind her. I thought we were going to look at the paper. Why did you text me to come up when you were clearly with someone else? Was the paper just an excuse? She didn't answer. Instead, she took another desperate glance down the stairs. Look, the paper is in here, she said, nodding toward the closed door. I'll give it to you. Take it and go. Please, Mark. Before Ethan hears us. She reached behind her, twisting the doorknob. As she pulled the door inward slightly, I could see inside the room, past her shoulder. The metallic object I'd heard fall wasn't a lamp or a vase. It was on the floor, glinting under the lamplight next to a discarded duffel bag. And it was a small, black, very official-looking handgun. My blood turned to ice. The sight of the gun paralyzed me. My focus narrowed to that single, terrifying object on the floor, ignoring Sarah and everything she was trying to say. This wasn't a secret boyfriend. This was something illicit, something criminal, maybe even something life-threatening. The man wasn't just hiding from Ethan. He was a serious danger. I finally found my voice, a choked whisper. Sarah, what is that? Who was that man? Is he threatening you? She slammed the door shut, cutting off the view of the weapon, and leaned against it, her chest heaving. Her eyes were no longer panicked. They were suddenly filled with a profound, exhausted resignation. It was the look of someone who had lost a war they never wanted to fight. He's not threatening me, Mark, she said, her voice dropping to a dead, hollow murmur. He's my client. I needed the cash, and he was the only one who would meet this late. Your client? I asked, completely bewildered. For what? You work in finance. Sarah looked me dead in the eye, and the real twist hit me, shattering my understanding of her completely. I haven't worked in finance for 6 months, Mark. I lied to everyone. I got fired. And that man, he wasn't here to pay for advice. He was here to pay for this apartment. Ethan and I are 3 months behind on rent, and if I didn't take this job tonight, we were going to be evicted by the end of the week. That gun, it belongs to the landlord, who gave me the loan shark's number. And the man who just left? He's paying to keep the secret quiet. I stared at her, the truth rearranging every single interaction we had ever shared. She wasn't the cool, corporate shark. She was drowning, and I had mistaken her desperation for connection. But then I noticed one detail. A small, blue envelope stuck to the bottom of the duffel bag she was dragging. It wasn't cash. It had Ethan's name printed clearly on the front. It wasn't just about rent. Whatever was in that envelope was directly tied to my best friend, and Sarah was hiding that too. The blue envelope with Ethan's name on it shattered the last shred of my composure. I grabbed Sarah's arm, not roughly, but with an urgency that demanded truth. What is this? What does Ethan have to do with the man with the gun? You said this was about rent. Sarah pulled the envelope from the bag, her hands shaking, and finally, the full, crushing weight of her secret spilled out. It started with Ethan, she confessed, her voice thick with tears now. He wasn't failing the econ class because he was lazy. He had a massive gambling problem he developed last semester. He took out predatory loans to cover his losses, thinking he could win it all back. He lost, Mark. He lost everything, including the money for the apartment deposit and our tuition for next semester. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan, my gentle, goofy roommate. The reason for all this secrecy, the real source of the conflict, was my best friend spiraling into debt and hiding it from me. The paper I was supposed to be reviewing was just a prop for a lie so deep, it had entangled Sarah in something terrifying. The paper was real, Mark, I swear, Sarah pleaded. He was failing because he was getting threats from the loan sharks, not studying. He didn't want my help, but I had to do something. When I got fired, I saw a way out. The man who just left, he's a debt collector who offered me a temporary job. He said if I could deliver certain information, he would wipe Ethan's slate clean. Information? I whispered, looking from the envelope to her pale, haunted face. What information? She held the blue envelope out to me, her eyes begging for forgiveness. He needed a name, a new, bigger target to go after. He told me the loan sharks were trying to infiltrate a powerful family, and he needed a weakness. Inside this envelope is the research I did on a college professor, Dr. Henderson. The man leaving tonight was supposed to take the envelope and disappear. I took the envelope, my fingers trembling on the heavy paper. It was a file on a man's life, and Sarah was trading it, trading someone else's destruction to save her brother. I looked at the staircase. The debt collector was gone. The gun was in the room. The choice was clear. I could take this evidence to the police and expose Sarah and her brother's dangerous secrets, or I could destroy the envelope and protect them, but at the cost of the Henderson family. Just as I decided to tear the envelope in half, I felt a familiar, heavy hand land on my shoulder. The economics paper, huh? Ethan's voice was right behind me, no longer sleepy, but ice cold. I spun around to see him standing there, holding a baseball bat from the hallway closet. Or is it the letter you were really here for? The sight of Ethan, standing there with the bat, wasn't threatening in a violent way, it was heartbreaking. His eyes, usually full of easy humor, were red-rimmed and filled with a desperate exhaustion that mirrored Sarah's. He didn't look like a dangerous debtor. He looked like a trapped child. He hadn't just woken up. He must have been listening to everything, or at least enough to piece together the terrifying fragments of the truth. Ethan, put the bat down, I said, my own voice surprisingly steady despite the pounding in my ears. I didn't back away. I held up the blue envelope, its presence now an undeniable symbol of the catastrophe he had created. You knew Sarah was doing this, didn't you? You knew she was putting herself in danger because of your debt. Sarah stepped away from the door and towards her brother, tears streaming silently down her face. He found out last night, Mark. When he saw me packing the research for the collector, he went ballistic. He was trying to stop me, to go down there himself, but I locked him in his room. The thud was him trying to break down the door. It all clicked into place. The mysterious man, the gun, likely the collector's way of intimidation, not Sarah's, and the frantic energy in the room. The real danger wasn't a boyfriend or a simple secret. It was the suffocating burden of shame and debt, and the lengths a sister would go to protect the person she loved. Ethan finally dropped the bat. It hit the floor with a hollow, anticlimactic thud. He looked at me, his best friend, then at his sister, his protector. I just wanted to fix it. I didn't want you guys to know I messed up so badly. I stepped forward and put my arm around his shoulder, pulling him into a hug that felt heavy with relief and sorrow. We're in this together, Ethan. You don't have to face this alone. Then I turned to Sarah. The courage she had shown, the desperate, foolhardy love that led her to involve herself with criminals to save her brother, was immense. The collector is gone, Sarah? We're not giving him this envelope. We're going to the police first thing in the morning. She nodded, wiping her eyes. The idea of going to the authorities was terrifying, but the alternative, trading one man's life for another's, was unthinkable. We agreed, right there in the dark hallway, standing between the upstairs secret and the downstairs lie, that we would face the consequences together. We would explain everything, take responsibility for the cover-up, and get Ethan the help he desperately needed for his addiction. The research paper, the one that started this whole mess, became irrelevant. The real work was saving Ethan. We stayed up the rest of the night, not reviewing academic structures, but reviewing bank statements, debt contracts, and the heavy legal documents that Sarah had hidden in her desk drawer. As the sun finally rose, casting long, clean light across the kitchen floor, the terror of the night was replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. The secrets were gone, but the love that had been hidden by them was now exposed and real. Sarah and I never blurred the line between friends and something more romantic. That intense connection we felt, it wasn't attraction. It was shared trauma and a deep, mutual respect born from seeing each other at our most broken and most fiercely protective. She became my sun, the person who illuminated the truth and showed me the moral compass when mine was spinning wildly. I became her trusted ally, the one person who saw her fall from grace and helped her climb back up. We saved Ethan that day, but more importantly, we saved ourselves from the burden of silence. The blue envelope ended up shredded in the garbage disposal, the information never delivered. We faced the fallout, the debt, and the long road to recovery, but we did it together. The thing is, the landlord was still owed money. But when we explained the situation, not the whole story, but enough to show the severity, he backed off the loan shark and gave us 3 months to pay. But the next morning, when I went to wake Ethan up to start facing reality, the envelope wasn't just shredded in the disposal. The front door was slightly ajar, and there was a note on the kitchen counter, written on the back of a crumpled-up economics paper. It simply read, "I'm sorry. I had to pay them back myself. Don't look for me."